Welcome to Revive Ministries Podcast. As we enter February, there's a lot of expectations in February. Maybe in the States, it's Valentine's Day for that special someone. But also, like I've found out, we're recording this February 6th, but those who don't know, it's actually Pay Compliment Day. I don't know if you know this. I just was reading this just earlier while I was preparing for this recording, and it was an interesting story from I think Cooper Smith. She says she was inspired by a cold day in Chicago. She was riding the bus. She noticed someone was waving for the bus, and she was on. The person was frantic, and although the bus driver was kind enough to stop and let the person on. It was I could the paragraph was explaining this holiday was unique, but what was unique about it was she felt compelled because of this that she wanted to compliment him, and it turned out to be a holiday. I know we have all these weird holidays, but I just wanted to share that little story. This month is connecting with our support. Revive Ministries just wants to expand that idea. Today we have a new guest. Her name is Donna. I'm really bad with pronouncing last name like names, but Donna, is it Chuck? Help me, please. Chacko.
Chocolate. Chacko.
Oh, Chacko. Thank you so much, Donna, for coming on and sharing your insight with us today.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. Very happy. Thank you, Robert.
I'd always like to start with a disclaimer. If you're in the United States, the 988 is a suicide crisis lifeline right now that is available. But wherever you are in the world, I do encourage you to find what resources, because resources look different for everyone. I always say people say better than me, Donna, and usually they do. This is from Sean Stevenson. He says, communication is merely an exchange of information, but connection is the exchange of our humanity. What comes to mind when you hear this quote?
Right on. I mean, it's not a solo journey, that is for sure. And when you try and do it that way, it frequently doesn't work so well. So absolutely.
Yeah, and I just love the verbiage when you think about this. I was talking to one of my friends and we were talking about the industrial revolution and how in the cities we're all compact and we didn't really say hello really well, reading about the kind of commentaries, and the idea was we were so close but we're not connecting well. And I feel like Sean Stevenson kind of emphasizes there's a difference between me just sharing information with you and me saying how are you and actually asking how are you. Not right. Yeah, so there's something to that. I want to ask you, and to kind of segue into our topic today, Donna, when thinking about your support, like the people around you, the people that, when you have a bad day or you just need support in your own little surrounding, in your circles, what played a positive impact in maintaining that healthy connection? It's very easy to kind of say, you know what, I'm not going to do it. I want to be left alone. And what has not helped you build, and the anticipate, what wasn't helpful in that regard?
Well, what was not helpful was going it alone, or maybe not even purposefully going alone, but being so busy in life and on the treadmill that you just don't take time for those kind of connections. And I did that for a long time, and it's taken me then another long time to put it all together. And I understand so clearly now how, an emotional intimacy and being trusting people, having people in your life that you trust, with whom you can be honest and vulnerable. I'm so blessed that I have that in several different ways, because at this point I'm happily married. I have close friends and like a group of women in a women's spiritual group. And I'm active in my church, and I find that for me personally, the support that is faith-based has been very, very deep, because it gets right to the core of what my life is about, or my priorities, what I'm trying to do in terms of being open to God and His will and what He wants for me. So for my support, it I learned that you need it. It doesn't happen. It doesn't just flow to you. You have to take steps to find it and work at it. And for me, a lot of it was my husband and other family members, but particularly faith groups
Hmm.
were just very critical, very meaningful.
I think about actually two things. One thing, when I got out of the military, I remember I was served 2000, 2004. I remember, I was struggling. I went to a support group, and I remember being in that support group and being like, "Ah, I can't be here. These people, like, they're complaining, and I had no support wells." And I felt, like, in hindsight, I'm like, I felt like I couldn't connect. And then the funny thing was, I went against the current. I said, you know what? These people don't know how hard it was for me. They don't know how hard it was for me. And then, you know what? I ended up back in the support group as a facilitator later on. And honestly, it's the best thing, one of the best things that happened to me. It's
Yes,
funny how that works, you know?
isn't it funny? Uh, I mean, you when you're in a support group, whether it be a spiritual,
Mhm,
and say religious based, or all of the 12-step programs, I
mhm,
mean, it's folks that have shared
mhm.
your problems enough that they know they can feel your
Yeah.
pain. And I don't know, we feel good in that circumstances where we can give and take support and be honest, and it's
Mhm.
just comfortable. It's yes.
Yeah, and I do, like, I know support looks different for everyone, but I found much success in the idea of, at the very least, something bigger than myself. So when I first went into the church, I was pretty good with the sound. Like, I went, I did sound when I was in high school. I just kind of like dabbling with sound, so they gave me the position of handling them sound, and I hated how long sometimes the service was. And I used to say to myself is, I'm not listening to this, but I'll make them sound good. That was it. And it's funny how, like, you just focus on one thing, and funny enough, it became more. So sometimes, when you're trying to get on the road to, I guess, recovery, or getting the road to healing, you don't have to see the whole staircase, as Martin Luther King said. You just have to take the first step, and that's what I did.
Right,
So
right. It's not easy. That first step is difficult.
it is, because you can talk yourself out of anything, especially
Mhm.
now. It's like it's like, okay, well, and there's so much information out there, so you could convince yourself to not, or to
Right,
do, or
right.
to do nothing. So
But information isn't going to cut it. So,
no.
my background is I was a doctor for many years,
Mm-hmm.
and um, traditional, and I thought about health in a more narrow way for sure
Mm-hmm.
than I do now. Um, but there are diseases and there are treatments, and I didn't understand this whole mind body thing.
Mm-hmm.
And our mind body spirit connection works best if it's connected to others, in
Mm-hmm.
not just our own growth. And so, uh, after some really difficult times in my personal life, and reaching my own crisis and bottom, that's when my faith
Mm-hmm.
started again, my grown up faith. That's when I had to decide
Mm-hmm.
what it meant for me, if anything, because I had let it slide. Don't. I didn't allow support from God, from others, from family,
Mm-hmm.
friends. I was just, had a busy life trying to be a working mother, raising kids, and being a physician,
Mm-hmm.
and in a lousy marriage. That was my combo. That was my that was my problem. We didn't do well, even though we were married for 27 years. But from all of that, see, I learned so much after the low point,
Mm-hmm.
and my husband died, and I started reaching out. reached out in many ways, and I think I had my first real connection, real honest, vulnerable, open support with someone when I was in my mid late 30s, and that's when I
Mm,
was pretty desperate, and I reached out to someone,
mm,
a woman, and it was just the start of these close connections where you
mm,
can share. And I mean, it was so incredibly healing. I just can't tell you.
mm,
And my own faith grew, and then it became not just breakfast with a couple of different ladies. It
mm,
became more a formal uh, church groups of various types,
mm,
sharing groups, and worship. And anyway, and now many years have passed, and I just understand that
mm.
to thrive and grow and live an abundant, healthy life, that's just a core ingredient, this connectedness.
Yeah, and I think you see a lot. We miss things that we don't know we're gonna miss. I would
Oh,
say, yeah, like in COVID, like like I remember the funny thing. No one even. I was just going to the store, had the mask on, precaution, and it was just how impersonal it was. I was getting something. Those small talk moments that you used to not care about. You're so busy with life. Everything was so like glass shield,
mhm,
mask on, and
mhm.
all I wanted to do, if the line was too long, was to get out. And it became more and more, and I didn't realize I missed those little small talks, even
Yeah,
though a lot of times they were not, sometimes we'll be like, oh, you're taking up my time, they're too slow, whatever it may be. I missed it. It's funny how that. I want to ask you, I want to, obviously, with my new guests, and then just, I do like to give an opportunity to you to share a little bit about where you came from, like where you were. You mentioned it a bit already, but I know you have. I was reading your profile. You have a ministry called Serenity and Health. Is that
yes,
correct?
yes,
And you also wrote a book, and it's going to kind of do a ticker: Pilgrim Age, a Doctor's Healing Journey. Is that correct?
that's correct. You got it. Thank you.
So yeah, those who are listening, those who are watching, there'll be links if you want to find out more. But go ahead, just share with us whatever you feel comfortable about your journey and what brought you to have the Serenity and Health as your ministry and write the book. So.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Robert. I mean, I just love to share the things I learned on my journey in the hope that it will help other people, and maybe they will pick up things uh, without waiting so many decades to pass by,
Mm-hmm, mm,
because our life and our health is so precious. And yes, well, I'm from the Pacific Northwest. I married quite young. Went to medical school, had 3 kids, and had a difficult marriage.
mm,
And uh, when you're busy and working, you don't. I didn't really understand
mm,
much of anything about that marriage. I,
mm,
I I mean, I didn't understand my role. I
mm,
I I as is the usual tendency, felt it was all his fault. I
mm,
didn't really understand. I just knew we were both hurting, and we were creating a really terrible home environment for our children. But we couldn't seem to come to any fix it. We
mm,
just couldn't. We were just going in circles, and I. Uh, I had been raised a Catholic, but because of I was just too busy, I had
mm,
sort of
mm,
let that slide. But somehow I just wasn't. Um, I I was very reluctant to get a divorce, even though I thought I should get a divorce.
mm,
And anyway, this went on for years, and it just reached a point where the stress and the dysfunction in the family was beyond which any kids should be raised. It was really
mm,
unhealthy. And by this time, I was back on my knees. I had gotten so desperate, without choices. I returned to my faith, and but I was so angry at God. I don't know why did he want me to, if he didn't want me to get divorced, why did he want me to be in this marriage? You know
mm,
what I mean?
mm,
And so, anyways, and this went on a while until several very specific things happened in our relationship that very clearly made me believe that God wanted me to stay married. It was a very dramatic pivot point in my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that was the path I had to take, except that it didn't quite solve the problem, because it didn't just turn into a perfect relationship after that. And the children were still in the home. So, I was kind of bargaining with God, like, okay, if you want me to stay married, you have to be in charge of the girls and help them get through this, help us all get through this. And so it was in my head, it was like I had to trust God with the children. And it stayed married, but we had relative peace after that for a few years, but it wasn't very long before he got sick and died.
Mm-hmm.
So then that was a real recalibration of like, what does that all mean? But through this whole time, I was giving God more time and attention in my life, being more open to his presence, and being more connected, starting to try and understand my role. And it just evolved. And I was 48 when he died, and I changed directions in my career. I moved to Washington, D.C. and started working in underserved areas with homeless people and immigrants. And eventually in there, I remarried. But I saw so much and I learned so much myself about stress, how it just can ruin our health, and this busyness that too many of us are sucked into, with kind of being oblivious about. Keep on going. I mean, that's what I did. I wasn't very aware. And that's why I wanted to take all this information and experience and share it. And it ended up with my, I guess you could call it a ministry. I do occasional programs at my church and other places, helping people to understand and empower them to take steps to cherish and care for their own health. It's a great gift we have, our health, our bodies. And I think that we are stewards. We should be stewards and just take care of it. But of course, it's complicated because we're stressed. And then we have all these relationship issues, which just really can also make us feel terrible, or angry, resentment, all emotional health. So anyway, in the process of writing my book, I ended up in therapy, because as I started to write details about my life, it was just too confusing. It's like it didn't even make sense. And it was really the best thing I ever did, other than rejuvenating my faith and turning back to God, because I understood a lot more. So now I continue to do things like this, encourage people to read my book, which is my journey, and the things that help me and the things that I think will help other people. And I'm just so grateful, to connect with people. Like I get to meet people like you, and that encourages me, and maybe you'll find some encouragement, and certainly your listeners. So it's like a give, win-win for everyone. I'm very, very grateful.
Yeah, and when you were talking, I was thinking about I'll just say this: I do my best work when I slow down.
Amen. Amen, Robert. That's probably one of the biggest things I learned. If a person never gives themselves some time for themselves and for their God, or for something more important than them, some quiet time, nature, reflection, prayer, something, it's going to be difficult.
It's I work, and you mentioning working with under resourced communities, homeless, immigrants. I work in the mental health field, so I know exactly sometimes of how difficult. You could tell someone, hey, you need to, keep track of, let's just say, diabetes. Let's just talk about, like, oh, you need to be, take your medications. You're just trying to be encouragement. But if they hate their lives, if that home environment is hard, why would they care? Why would they even care?
Exactly.
And
Exactly. No, exactly, Robert. That's it. And even in a more privileged type of person, maybe with financial security and everything, if they're really unhappy or depressed or stressed, they're not going to deal with an exercise and eating program. It
no.
just go bye bye because their brain is full of all this other stuff. It's just the way we are.
Yeah, and I feel even if it does stick for a little bit, it won't stick for long because life happens, and then a lot of times, unfortunately, if they do backslide, it backslides heavy, and they're so discouraged, they feel ashamed, they close themselves off from everyone.
Hmm.
When really it's just these little micro steps, because sometimes, especially when you're trying to regain health, let's say you want to lose weight, you want to be better, it takes time. It's not like, oh, 1, 2, 3. If you look at the problem and the scope of how long you haven't taken care of yourself, it's kind of unreasonable. But we put these unreasonable tasks on ourselves. A little bit of grace, knowing that this will take time. But why are you doing it? Because you want to be healthier. Why do you want to be healthier? You ask these questions to yourself. Sometimes I find when you personalize the objective, it does seem to stick more than someone else tell me, oh, you need to lose weight. Oh, I know I need to lose weight, but I'm miserable, but you never talk to me. I have no one to talk to, and I'm lonely. I know that sounds, but at the same time,
No,
if, yeah.
it's real and common. The statistics about loneliness and depression and anxiety are really sobering. And yeah,
And my concern also is with the busyness, moving, is that we don't take the time to, we generalize everything. And it's not generalized. For if there's a problem, it's going to be specific to you. And sometimes we generalize so much that our communication gets lackluster. George Bernard Shaw says the single biggest problem with in communication is the illusion that it has taken place. Sometimes we watch too many, you know, we
right.
we kind of mirror. Oh, that was okay in a sitcom or something, or what your friends talk about in at work. Oh, that's normal for them, then it's okay for me. Well, why is it has to be? Why do you put your standard externally outside of yourself? Why don't you take the time to think about what's important to you? And I feel that for me was a big pivotal moment for me because, um, rest looks different. Obviously there's rest when you sleep, but sometimes rest is your hobbies. What do you like doing? It's restful to kind of immerse yourself. At least for me, from my experience.
Right, right. And I wasn't good at that for a long time. I
Yeah.
mean, I didn't, because since I was working and I had
Hmm.
children, I felt that I couldn't take more time for myself. I already had my work.
Hmm.
So I just never did anything except work just, and I even had help in the house a lot of time. But I mean, between work and the children and whatever, it's like, and yeah, I, uh, lately I like pat myself on the back when I do just fun things that have no um, real value. And the latest, Robert, you'll love this. I have become really over like a number of years a really big LeBron James fan. And I
Okay.
mean, but like watching an NBA game or even just the last quarter doesn't matter. I just think this is just terrific for me. It's just something that I needed to balance myself and
Mm-hmm.
take myself out of the work thinking, always planning things. So, and I think we all need something, just like you said.
Yeah, something cathartic. It's some, for me. It's music. Sometimes it's um, video games. As funny as it is, with modern, I do. I don't. I'm not. I'm kind of a hermit. I'll tell people when it comes to video games, I don't like playing with people, but I make videos, and I just for me, it's cathartic. It's a hobby. It's something
Yeah.
that It's my way of journaling.
You
Music, I
you
find.
you
Hmm?
make video games or you make
No,
video?
no, no. I play video games. I make videos of the video games. I just, for me, it's yeah. So for me, it's just cathartic. It's nothing that I take seriously, but it's just my I guess freehand way of kind of
Yeah,
journaling.
yeah,
So some people will say, "Oh, Rob, you're doing so much. You need to rest." Well, sometimes rest is that. It's not
yeah,
always just lying down. So I feel having those self-talk can kind of measure that, but obviously rest is important. I think, let me just uh and going down the same line that we're talking, Veronica told I get these names that I'm gonna really butcher. So
that's all.
Veronica,
Yeah.
she says, to know yourself you must sacrifice the illusion that you already do. I think the reason she says this, for me, and I want to hear your thoughts. I think it's because it's an ongoing process. It doesn't. It keeps changing. What's important to me 5 years ago is not important to me now. Like we kind of keep changing. So if we stay static, like life is not static, we can have the illusion that we know ourselves. This is how I think about
Yeah. Yeah, it's tricky because sometimes we only allow ourselves
it.
to
Yeah.
know certain things. I mean, we have blinders
Mm-hmm.
because we don't really want to know the whole dark truth about maybe our beliefs
Mm-hmm.
or and you let psychologists talk about all the tricks we use to
Mm-hmm.
protect ourselves from psychic trauma.
Mm-hmm.
We denial, for example, we it's not that bad. It's really okay. Everybody else is doing it, or
Mm-hmm.
so we see ourselves one way
Mm-hmm.
because we wear our blinders and keep them right in place and don't allow ourselves to go deeper. Maybe there's a really um, afraid child deep within that is making you irritable or lash out or self harm. And sometimes it takes therapy
Mm-hmm.
to know yourself. It's not easy to go in those deep dark places where we have hidden. And sometimes I think we can allow it to slowly, I don't know, what kind of imagine percolate to the top of our consciousness if we slow down.
Mm-hmm.
We practice some sort of meditative prayer
Mm-hmm.
or walking in nature or other mindfulness type practice so that we're not just churning. And because the real self is often way deeper than the shallow stuff that we shine for the world, you know?
Yeah, and I feel, well, I think when we're comfortable who we are. We know, the idea is that we're always unfinished. I feel sometimes we have this idea that we're going to be finished somehow, and I feel, what has been helpful for me is to know that my whole life is always going to be unfinished, and I'm okay with it. It means, like, because there's always going to be projects, there's always going to be things I want to work on, but the old motto is like embrace the journey, but I think sometimes that verbiage may not be confusing. What journey? Where am I going?
Yeah.
It's really just understanding for me that my life is gonna be unfinished, but at the same time, it's there's so much you can learn. I think one thing regarding the whole, knowing yourself and slowing down. One thing I've learned is, because I was, worried about everything else, everyone else and how they thought of me. At times, I won't admit it. When you're young, you're like,
Of course.
how people, it's like you're in college. Should I? Does everyone hate me, or should I go to sleep? Or it's one of those things. But I would say, when you start respecting yourself, not because of some title, not because you got some job title, because you're because who you are, you start valuing the more inner bits of you. Because the problem, if your joy is outward towards something or someone or some status of, the problem is life keeps changing. We saw that last 3 years.
Mhm.
So I would say, if you respect your time, if you don't respect your time, no one else will. I guess you could say it that way.
That is for sure. That is for sure. I think what helped me, and I think what helps many, many people who believe in God. I happen to be a Christian, so
Hmm.
for me, a source of just tremendous comfort is knowing that God knows me and all the crazy stuff that I have done and thought and
Hmm.
still do. But He knows that I love him, and
Hmm.
I'm trying to do the best I can, and I slow down enough now
Hmm.
to give him some time and think about my path,
Hmm.
and recalibrate if necessary, say
Hmm.
I'm sorry if necessary, but it's just this constant feeling of support, to use your word, and comfort, and I can trust that. I know that
Yeah.
at my core now, and that was not like that in many years earlier in my life, and I gotta say, this feels a whole lot better.
Yeah, and for me, when I was, in the sound, and later on as I grew in my faith, because I'm Christian myself too, what was a simple, I guess, thought that came in my mind reading the Bible was, God doesn't change.
Mhm.
And that, for me, that concept, just that concept alone, is was very comforting for me, because everything around me kept changing. And
Yeah.
it gets all the uncertainty, and everything. It was comforting to know at least one thing in my life does not change. And
Mhm.
even, Revive Ministries doesn't proselytize, but at the same time, I'm inspired by seeing things that are bigger than ourselves to kind of grasp on. At the same time, I do encourage those who are listening to, when you're talking about yourself, when you're talking about reflecting, it's harder a lot of times if you don't have some sort of foundation. It can't be, oh, I want to be better so I can be better. A lot of times I find a lot of my healing helping other people. Serving others became my healing, being my recovery, and it's funny that works that way, and kind of goes with our theme today. I want to ask you, as this has been a wonderful conversation. I want to ask you, Donna, what have you seen personally that helped you to have a better sense of yourself? I know you mentioned meditation, your prayer, the support that you I guess in a way rediscovered. So what has helped you?
Yeah. I mean, it was therapy was tremendously helpful,
Mhm.
um, because I became aware through that process of default behaviors, of automatic behaviors and thoughts that had been guiding my life for many years that I kind of really wasn't aware of. And one of them was, I've alluded to it indirectly, was this drive to work and be productive of every second, not to
Mhm.
just waste time. And, that was so drilled into my brothers and I, is the way
Mhm.
my parents were post depression and World War II, and that's how they got through it, and that's what we
Mhm.
were taught. And but I didn't realize how much I had sacrificed because of that. And the thing of it is, it gives many rewards, right? If you work really hard, you're going to
Mhm.
be rewarded with a good job, and you make
Mhm.
money, and I guess there's status. So yes, so therapy, and then the biggest thing is just giving some time for prayer and reflection. And I'm a firm believer in a meditative type of prayer to allow the divine therapist, so to speak, to do his work. And you don't have to be a Christian, you don't have to be anything for these kind of maneuvers, like the 12 steps programs, which are just so dramatically wonderful that we all need them. Speak of a higher power, and um, that I think may solve the problem for a lot of people who have different beliefs that are not in a defined religion.
Yeah, and I feel that what you mentioned, just um, like I said before, I do my best work when I slow down. A lot of times we don't give us enough time to even be self-aware. Um, go deeper. A question, answering a question about yourself should lead to more questions. We're not, be more curious. The fact of the matter is, if you're okay that you're unfinished. I know I'm not great at everything. It's kind of like if I assumed I'm going to do a bicycle kick like they did in FIFA, just because I saw it on TV and I thought it would be cool to do. Those are years, a lifetime of practice and dedication. It's all that would do if you have these unreachable kind of goals. It'll just at times, especially if you don't know who you are, or what your priorities are, you'll be discouraged. I would say give yourself time.
Mhm.
You're the one who's gonna live with you, if that makes sense. you
Right,
know
right,
It-
right.
it's-
And from a health point of view, the other part of awareness, which I was really ignorant about for a long time, was this ability we have to be aware of our bodies, to listen to our bodies, like
mhm.
to figure out when you are stressed, where do you feel it? So
Yeah.
that you can then tune in quick and recognize it, and do something about the stress instead of letting it get worse and worse. Stop what you're doing, go for a walk, take 3 breaths. We can all take a couple of breaths when we're stressed out, say a prayer, anything, but don't
Mhm.
just let it get worse and worse.
Yeah, don't let it fester. Don't feel that, this is just everyone. Who's everyone? The idea is, you're the one experiencing it. You're the one who knows the context. You have, and I would like to say also, you mentioned, I'm half South Korean, half Puerto Rican, so I'm already confused. So, but the funny thing is, um, you know, a lot of traditions, they are tradition. And what I'm trying to say is, um, the environment changes, your life changes. So I remember in a Korean household, in the Korean old school Korean household, the harmony is grandma is the one who was in charge, and everyone, the oldest son would live with the mother will and grandparents will live with the oldest son. It was traditionally that way, and that was because it was a different time. Doesn't work so well nowadays. But
Yeah.
environments, channel, and using that as an illustration. But you yourself change. If you assume that you know who you are 10 years ago, if your best time was 10 years ago, there's something wrong. Because you're kind of living in suspension. You're kind of
Mhm.
at still. The thing is, you could. I say this also with friendships. I have friendships that I hope the best for them. I have no ill intent, but our lives cross in different ways. It's not that I just don't see them. I don't engage as much. It's not because I don't like them. Just life continues to move on. But at the same time, what has helped me is to know that that this is just going to be kind of the constant. But it's okay if you give yourself time to recognize it, recognize who you are and who you're with, which is you. So I want to ask you. I know, just for um, just final thoughts. What are your final thoughts? We talked about a lot. I know there's so much more we could say, but I just want to ask, what are your final thoughts?
Yeah, here's my final thoughts for anybody out there. If you're feeling stuck and you don't feel well, or you're not sleeping well, or you have aches and pains, or you've been meaning to do some exercises, but you're not quite yet, or you snack too much in the evening, or you're stressed, uh, you have power to make some changes. And you just have to start real small and do something different than you're doing now. To see a change, you have to make a change. So maybe for you, it might be getting up 10 minutes early for a quiet time. Or maybe for you, it might be not eating junk food after 9 o'clock at night. Or maybe you've been meaning for a long time to call a counselor or to see somebody for help.
Hmm.
Maybe now is the time.
Hmm.
Or start thinking about who you can connect with in a small group through any organization you belong to, or close neighbors or family. So someone that you can, in a regular basis, get close to and share back and forth, help each other. So that's my main thing. We have a lot of power to make things better when we're stuck, but sometimes in the stuckness, we just don't take those steps. So just make sure it's a little step to start off with. So,
Yeah, and I appreciate you coming on, you sharing your insight, and just having the conversation. Because a lot of us, um, when it comes to connecting, when it comes to, like you said at the end, asking for help, that could be the hardest thing to do.
mhm.
I know being raised is very, you give a good gift, your friend is a birthday, whatever. We're pretty good at giving gifts, especially if there's nothing tied to it. I've noticed, but we're really hard as we grow older to receive a gift. Just it kind of brings the awkwardness at times. If someone is benevolent and someone's being nice to you, like, why? But a lot of times we and
Right.
understandably, but at the same time, if we're not able to get out of our comfort zone, if we're not able to ask for help, I encourage those who are listening to ask for help. It's okay. It's okay to not be okay. It's okay that you're not where you want to be right now. It's it's just little steps, and there's not a race. It's not for someone else. I would encourage you to find things to do, to set goals for you, you know
Mhm.
not for, oh, I want to make this person, I want to make my family proud. I understand that concept, but life keeps changing. The idea is keep those goals and values and internal, so you could, if you're not able to keep that constant, you won't be able to a lot of times keep it consistent. So I do want to encourage you to find out who you are. Thank you so much
No, you're
for
very welcome.
uh,
Very, very welcome.
I just want to share. Remember to stay updated with ReviveMinistryFL.com is our website. I'll leave you with this last quote. It's from Lao Tzu. It says, "A man with outward courage dares to die. A man with inner courage dares to live."